This is a really unsettling memory from my early years. I was around 7 or 8 years old when my mother used to drop me off at my friend Sean's house after school. Sean, our friend Johnny, and I would go there together. Johnny and Sean were a year older than me. We met when I was playing with my brother on the block. Johnny and Sean lived nearby. Sean had a strange upbringing that I never fully understood. His sister was about 20 years old, and there was a significant distance between them. She was always his caregiver, and whenever I visited his house, it seemed like his sister was always with another man. It also seemed like his sister was always cold to me, never acknowledging me, saying hello, or anything. Sean's mother, I assume, was constantly working out of town, and his father was never present. I guess I only met Sean's mom a few times. We never really stayed in touch for long enough for me to figure all this out anyway. My mom dropped me off at Shaw's expecting that Sean's mom would be trick-or-treating with us after saying goodbye. I went into his house. Johnny was already there. We all had big pillow sacks to fill with candy. This was around the time that I learned that neither Sean's mom nor sister were coming with us to supervise. I was young, so I sort of felt slightly uncomfortable, knowing that Johnny and Sean would be leading the way, but at the same time I felt a sense of excitement that we'd have more freedom. I knew for a fact my mom would not have approved of us going unsupervised though. So eventually we were off into the neighborhood walking around doing our rounds. Door 2, quite a few people asked if we were alone or where our parents were, and Johnny would always be the one to use the same lie that his mom is up ahead with his sister at work every time. This was on a Friday, so we didn't get to start at trick-or-treating until around 5 o'clock, but we didn't have school the next day, so we intended on going until our pillow sacks were completely full. We took a break after a couple of hours and went to Shaw's, where he heated up a bunch of frozen pizzas. At the time I was so jealous of the apparent freedom he had in his house, not having parents who cared about what he did. But looking back now, I count myself super blessed to have grown up in a household with two strict parents. After we hung out at his house for an hour and watched Halloween specials on Nickelodeon while eating pizza and candies, after a while, Johnny's mother brought him up, but Sean and I were determined to continue, so we went back out for round 2. By this point, it was dark outside, so it had to be after 8 p.m. We tried to visit some blocks we hadn't yet visited, which meant going farther from Sean's house. We discovered a block we hadn't yet visited and kept knocking on doors because there were a lot less trick-or-treaters now. As we continued going door to door, we noticed a man pushing a stroller a couple houses down behind us. He was walking very slowly in our direction, probably a dad trick-or-treating for his young child. As we got closer, we heard him singing softly and going sh. Eventually, he caught up to us and asked how the trick-or-treating was going, to which we replied, "Good," at the same time, and then he said, "It's pretty late. I'm on my way back to my house. I can give you guys the rest of my candy." Sean and I exchanged knowing looks as though we had just won the lottery. Sean asked what kind of candies we had, and he replied that there were several bags of various items. He said he didn't want to reveal too much because he wanted to take his daughter for a trick-or-treat walk, but he did have a bag hanging on one of the stroller's handles that contained some candies. We couldn't see his daughter because the stroller was completely covered by a folding piece on top. He said that she was asleep and that he didn't want to wake her, but he pointed ahead and said that his house was just up this way, so we followed him as he pushed the stroller. He was walking a little faster now, and as we went, I noticed that, despite the fact that it was Friday night, it seemed like a quieter side of the neighborhood. The man spoke to us as we went, asking us basic questions about where we were from and where we went to school. I let Sean answer most of the questions, him being even just a year older than me at that age. I felt like he was the one who should take lead on multiple occasions. As we walked, the man would lean into the stroller and talk in a high pitch to his daughter, then he turned back and smiled at us. We finally made it to his house. He led us up the walkway with the stroller and unlocked his door after he opened it. He brought the stroller with his daughter inside first and then invited us to come inside. Sean led the way, so I followed. I was the one to ask if we could leave the door open, and the man paused and then said yeah, of course. He said he'll be right back as he goes to get the candy bags. He pushed the stroller into the middle of the living room, only about 10 feet away from where we were standing. I nudged Sean because I felt uncomfortable. I whispered, why would he leave the candy so far away? Sean didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the living room and then walked up to the stroller. He lifted up the folding part that was covering the baby, and he looked disturbed. He hurried back to me whispering, let's go. He was full and running once we got outside, and I followed behind, which was a bit tougher because we had those heavy pillow sacks. I still was confused about what he saw. But just then we heard a woman's voice. Why, excuse me, it was one of his neighbors. She came running over to us and asked if we know that man, and it was at this point that Sean spilled the beans and said he offered us his leftover candy, but he was pushing a stroller with a fake baby in it. I remember getting goosebumps as he said that. The woman said, yeah, that man doesn't have a child. I saw you was walking by with him. She took us to her car and drove each of us home. I know getting into a stranger's car after that was another questionable move. The woman came to my front door to talk to my mom about what we just told her. My mom was distraught after I told her every last detail about the night. She sent me to my room while my parents called the police on that man. My parents never told me anything about what happened after that. I believe they wanted to shelter me from any more exposure to the situation. My mom didn't want me to visit Sean's house anymore, and I know she had a lot to say to Sean's mom. I still occasionally saw Sean at school, and we remained close, but our friendship was never the same after that. Music night. On Halloween night of 2016, my parents gave me the responsibility of giving candy to every child in the school. I knew we would have a ton of candy left over for weeks, and I would be the one eating them for days, if not weeks, because I was trying to lose weight. I always told my mom that she went overboard with the candies, and the house was in a dead end, so we rarely had any trick-or-treaters. But we did have some devoted kids who would regularly visit our house, knowing how much candy we'd give. This year, Halloween fell on a Monday while I was a college student. This semester, I was fortunate enough to have Mondays and Wednesdays off, so I spent the first part of the day at the gym before working on my classwork. It was always around 4:00 p.m., and the sound of children outside would signal that trick-or-treaters were out. I believe the first time the doorbell rang was between 4:00 and 5 p.m. From the first trick-or-treater until 8 p.m., there were probably 10 to 15 people in total. As I mentioned earlier, since cul-de-sac was out of the way for people to come, it was more effective for trick-or-treaters to pass it and just keep going straight. The day went as expected. There's nothing interesting about giving out candy to young children all day long, and my dog Vito barks like crazy every time the doorbell rings. Since it was Monday night, things ended much earlier than usual. I would say that I finished enough of my homework, but I did put some dents in my projects, so I ate some of my mom's leftover stew and went to my room to watch Game of Thrones. I had only been watching 2 episodes when the doorbell suddenly began to ring. It must have been around 9:30 when I checked the clock, so I went downstairs to the front door and opened it. On the other side of the glass stone door was a tall man wearing a clown costume and a scary-looking mask. I could tell it was a man based only on his frame, and he waved at me before pointing to the brown sack he was holding, which appeared to be empty. I didn't open the storm door. Instead, I said, "Sorry, we don't have any more candy," and slammed the door shut and immediately locked it. I instantly regretted opening the door. I genuinely thought it was just some kid or an unfortunate mother or father who worked late and wanted to get some last-minute trick-or-treating in with their kids. Whoever I just saw on our stoop was not a kid. Hell, it didn't even look like a teenager. The frame of this person was massive, and the clown costume just made him look even bigger. Thankfully, I didn't grab the candy bag before opening the door so he couldn't see that I was lying. I hovered by the door for a bit just to listen and see if I'd hear footsteps walking away, but not only did I not hear him walk away, he rang the doorbell again. Vito once again started going ballistic. Vito is a rat terrier. His bark is not intimidating, nor would he ever actually defend the home from an intruder. I picked him up and carried him upstairs after turning off the lights downstairs. This was my half-ass attempt at getting him to think I was absolutely never opening that door again tonight. I put Vito in my room and shut the door so he wouldn't keep barking. I stood at the top of the stairs listening, and then I heard through the front door the storm door being forced open like there was a loud snap, implying that the latch may have been broken from force. I then heard both knocks on the front door and then the door not moving around at this point. I decided to hide my room. I was incredibly unsettled. I texted my family group chat about what was going on. No one answered, though of course I knew that whoever that was had to get bored. I would have texted all my guy friends asking who it was, but all my guy friends are short. I resumed the episode one was watching. I was truly just trying to pretend he wasn't there. I kept urging Vito to shut up because I had my blinds closed and I didn't want that, __. But there was nothing else I could do when the doorbell rang again. Clown knowing what room I was in. I tried calling my dad, but he didn't pick up. I called my brother, who picked up saying he wasn't alone, and I knew that meant he was with a girl. I told him check my texts. There's some guy dressed as a clown at the door and he won't go away. My brother said it's a Halloween prank and to just ignore it. He seemed like he was in a hurry to get off the phone, so I hung up. I hoped he was right. It honestly made the most sense to be a prank. So after a few more minutes of sitting on the edge of my bed anxious, the doorbell did not ring again. I finally felt safe to relax again and lay back down. I started drifting away slowly, so I turned off the TV to allow complete silence and darkness in the room, and very shortly after that I drifted to sleep. I don't even think I was asleep long enough to enter REM state and have a dream. When I woke up to Tito growling and quietly barking as he would do when he was waiting for approval from one of us. I told him to be quiet and he stopped. I looked to see what he was looking at. He was looking at the window. I could almost tell I heard something rubbing against the window as I listened to the faintest thumping noises coming from just outside the window. My bedroom was on the second floor of the house, so it's not like anyone could be outside my window, but I wondered what it was. I got up and pushed open the blinds, and boy was I wrong. A man in a clown costume was at my window. All I could see was that hideous mask on the other side of the glass, and he tilted his head as he stared at me while I screamed. Tito didn't even bark, as I recall. Or perhaps I simply blocked out everything else. I took my phone and fled my room, locked the door, and dialed 911. I was too shaken to even cry, and my voice was trembling as I spoke to the 911 operator. I must have asked the operator once every 20 seconds to get the police to come as quickly as possible, and she told me the same thing every time. The police arrived at the house in about 10 minutes, and after checking the outside of the house for any attempted entry points, they discovered that the latch on the front storm door was broken, as I had assumed, and that leaning against the side of the house by my bedroom window was my dad's ladder. The man went into our storage shed outside and found my dad's ladder to use to climb up to my window in order to prevent this from happening any further, so I went to sleep at my guy friend Adam's house. To this day, I'm not sure if this was just a sickly funny Halloween prank, or if a terrible crime was about to be committed with the sick novelty of it being Halloween. I think Halloween was on a Tuesday this year, so the big party night was the Saturday before. My friends and I were still looking for last-minute plans since everything was sold out. Ideally, we wanted to find a house party. We all had pretty funny costumes too, and we wanted to get good use out of them. My friend Kate actually decided to put on her Instagram and Snapchat stories looking for parties tonight, not something I would have ever done. I'd find that to be kind of shameless and embarrassing, but I was glad she was willing to do it. I was surprised when she texted in the group chat that someone hit her up about a party pretty soon after she sent a screenshot of the details in the group chat. It had an address, start time, and a few ground rules such as the party would only be indoors, no backyard access, and bring your own booze. It also said must bring at least one girl for every guy. The guy who sent the details to Kate was one of our guy friends around our age who mutually knew a lot of the same people we did. Apparently a number of people we knew were going to this party. The house address was one town over, super close, so between the four of us we all went to Shauna's house and she had the open crib. We pre-gamed there for about an hour. As we all finished up getting ready, we waited till our guy friends confirmed that they were going, then we decided to head over. We called an Uber. We all had our own drinks varying from 4 loose to White Claws to vodka shooters. The Uber driver was probably tired of us by the end of the drive. When we arrived at the house, we noticed a lot of cars everywhere. The house was large and had a large front yard, and since there were 4 of us walking in, we knew that whoever was hosting the party would love us. There was no music playing until we were almost at the door, at which point we heard the bass beating. I opened the door, and the first room we entered was across from the kitchen and the living room. The entire house was dimly lit, except for a few orange lights that were hung up, clearly creating a Halloween party. In the meantime, an older man arrived and greeted us. He asked for our names and revealed that he was John Luke's father, indicating that Luke was the one organizing the party. Ambience was very packed, but to be honest, we didn't know anyone. Kate phoned the boys we knew to check whether they were there yet. I inquired about Luke's identity and where he attends school, and he said, "Oh, he's around here somewhere. You can ask him when you see him." He then asked us if we wanted to put our drinks in the cooler and led us into the kitchen, where 3 large coolers of ice were present. Each cooler already had a number of drinks in it, so we put some of our cans in the coolers. John appeared to be in his 50s, which would make sense if his son was hosting the party, but it also seemed a little strange that he would be so gregarious and involved in his own home. He was chatting with everyone, presumably mostly the girls, and he seemed to be intoxicated. At one of the tables, the 4 of us played beer pong. When some of the guys struck up a conversation with us, we started playing with them. Kate went on to say that our male friends were on their way, which pleased me. John abruptly called out my and Kate's names while shouting shots in the kitchen near the counter. Shauna and Tracy, my other 2 friends, appeared a little irritated, so I asked if we could all have one. He said, "Yeah, sure," so we all went to the kitchen counter next to him and took a shot of tequila. It was strange how much the father of the house was trying to get the party going. He had this strangely welcoming yet unnerving presence, the unnerving part being that he was much older than the people here, who were mostly college-aged, and he was pushing drinks on them. He asked what our poison was, and I wasn't going to say anything until the girls all gave their favorite drinks. I gagged because there was no lime, and I was definitely starting to get drunk after this. John started making a bunch of mixed drinks. In the meantime, we went back to the beer pong table where the guys we were playing were still waiting. I plugged my phone into an outlet just because I was down to like 50%. Then I went back to the game. Mid-game, John came over with 2 drinks for Kate and I, and then he came back with 2 more for Shaw and Tracy. They were all in red Solo cups. He made me a vodka soda. I sipped on it during our beer pong game. Whenever I had a chance, I was drinking it slow. Because I was already drunk after we lost to the random guy, I went to get my phone only to realize it didn't charge at all. It was still at the same percent. The outlet wasn't working. I didn't feel comfortable leaving my phone on any other outlets, so I just refrained from killing the battery any further. Our guy friends eventually showed up, and it was soon after this point that things quickly became a blur. I mean very quickly, like 1 second I remember talking with our friend Jeff, the next blacked out. The next thing I remember was my friends waking me up in the car outside my house. I felt woozy, my vision was blurred, my head was spinning. We were in one of our guy friends' cars. One of the guys walked me to my front door and helped me inside. Then they all left. I was alone except for my parents asleep in their room. I felt I must have drank way too much, but I also had a woozy weird feeling in my head that I never felt from drinking. I felt dizzy. I went straight to my room to bed. I checked my phone and I had some texts from a random unsaved number. I opened it and there were a bunch of texts already. It started with me texting my name and then they responded, "John O." After that he said, "You look so cute." Based on the time he sent this, it was still during the party. There was a 2-hour gap from then until he texted me again saying, "Where did my favorite girls go?" I was shocked at myself that I gave that man my number. I must have been more inebriated than I realized, but I put my head on the pillow and fell asleep right away. When I woke up the following morning, I was reading sickening texts that made my head spin. John had texted me to ask where I was going and to tell me that I was coming to your house because you had left something here. He then followed up with, "Hey, are you awake? And I'm here. Can you come to the door? Additionally, he made 3 attempts to reach me, all at around 2 in the morning. I sent my friends the screenshot, and they reminded me of what had happened. John was all over me, and I was turning into a zombie. My friends became worried, so they pulled me away, and we left the party. As we were leaving, 2 police cars pulled up outside, presumably in response to a noise complaint. Everyone noticed that the house was empty, with only beer pong tables and people. One of my guy friends looked up the number somehow, and he told me it was a voice over IP number which I didn't understand, so he just said it was a fake phone number that John texted me from. He also said that with my number he could easily find my address. I felt even more sick now. I asked if anyone ever met his alleged son, and everyone said no. We were starting to think there was no son. And when Shauna suggested he might have roofied me, it made so much sense. I'd never before felt the way I was feeling. We decided to take this to the police. We all went to the nearest police station and reported everything, including the text. The cop at the front desk asked if this was in relation to the house party in the vacant house last night. We were at first confused by him saying vacant house until he explained that there was a call from neighbors about a party going on in a house that had been vacant for some time. We all looked at each other with our mouths gaping. We were all brought into an office to sit down with, I guess, a detective to take down the whole story. He took the fake phone number and said they'll try to trace this back to somebody once they get a warrant. We gave the police everything we could and we went on our way. I blocked the fake number. This was obviously a very dangerous man, and the fact that we haven't been called in to identify anyone yet makes me feel as though he's still at large. I felt sick about it for a while, but as the days passed and nothing happened, I was sure it was over. However, none of us ever heard from the police, and we never heard of any arrests being made, or anything to suggest that the man went out of his way to advertise a house party in an empty house to have access to young women, ruined me, and possibly other girls lied about having a son.